Have a talent or skill that you can turn into a business idea? Well, don't sleep on you, my youth. Get your business started today. The Youth Economy Agency will guide you. Provide funding. Yes, sister, provide funding. Plus training to run your business profitably. Yo, go online now to start living the St. Lucian dream. Just one click and boom, you're in business. But imagine, sometimes it's feeling like there's only 2 days in the week. Yesterday was Monday, and look at that Friday afternoon. So hear that. Do you have a talent or skill that you can turn into a business idea? Well, don't sleep on you, my youth. Get your business started today. The Youth Economy Agency will guide you. Provide funding. Yes, sister, provide funding. Plus training to run your business profitably. Yo, go online now to start living the St. Lucian dream. Just one click and boom, you're in business.
With outlets from Grosse Lake to Soufriere, W-Mart is indeed your community shop. Giving you the best prices and widest variety, we've got everything you need. Chicken, turkey, beef and pork, saltfish, pigtail, ham, all in stock. Delicious franks, nuggets, cheese and fries. Prices you can't beat and quality for sure. With 9 locations island-wide, W-Mart is your one-stop family meat shop. W-Mart, small store, big convenience.
W-Mart.
Good afternoon and welcome to Youth Unplugged with me, Miguel Fevrier, on, of course, the Caribbean Sound Radio, Caribbean International. And today I have the honor of speaking with a young woman whom I admire greatly. Someone whose mind, discipline, and commitment to people have placed her at the heart of national and regional discussions. Our guest this afternoon is Miss Rhyesa Joseph. Some people say Rhyesa. I like to say Rhyesa because it sounds a little more exotic. A political analyst, development strategist, lecturer, and cultural advocate with over 12 years of experience in governance, community development, and socio-cultural research. She is a UWI Cave Hill valedictorian, an MPhil researcher whose work on Kudme was featured internationally in the 2023 Palgrave Macmillan publication, and a former UWI TV feature interviewer, earning the inaugural UWI TV Student Ambassador Award. And you'll hear me saying, you notice I said UWI instead of UE because that was actually what I was taught by someone from there. It is the UE, the University of the West Indies. Anyway, her leadership spans the St. Lucian National Reparations Committee, the Jeff SGP UNDP National Steering Committee, and a tenure as Executive Director of the Folk Research Center, where she championed cultural heritage and community empowerment. Today, as a history lecturer at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, she continues shaping national consciousness and developing the next generation of critical thinkers. She joins us this afternoon to discuss youth participation in the recent general election and the state of Creole in our education system and the evolving role of young people in shaping St. Lucia's governance and future. Ms. Rhyesa Joseph, welcome to Youth Unplugged.
Thank you so much for that very gracious welcome. And you did pronounce my name correctly on the second time, Rhyesa.
Rhyesa, I love it. Oh,
yes,
I love it.
yes, that is the correct pronunciation. Good afternoon. Bon après-midi tout le monde. I'm very pleased to be here today.
All right, great to have you. It's really wonderful to have you. And let me just also give you my kudos while we're here for your coverage of the election night results, because it was good to see you and Raim young people joining that conversation. And I think that's one of the things that we had been missing for a number of years before regarding the coverage of our elections.
Okay. Deeply appreciated. We're always following, always engaging. It might not be on a national platform, but we're always observing what's happening within the St. Lucian context and trying to make sure that we add our voice and share expertise as much as possible.
Wonderful. Okay, so my first question to you, and what we're going to do, the formats that we have is that I'm going to ask you some, of course, standard questions based on our discussion regarding youth and politics and Creole, but then there's also going to be a rapid fire round where you I shoot you those questions and you respond with the first thing that comes to your head.
No problem. I'm seeing you laughing, and I hope whatever I say is appropriate for radio too.
Nah, man, I've seen you perform before. You'll be good. You'll be fine. All right. So
Okay, no problem.
our first question is, how significant do you think the youth role was in this past general election, December 1st?
I believe it was critical. I tried to engage a number of young people, even within my community, who had conversations where they approached me to tell me about how they felt about the political parties, the issues that swayed them, even in seats that we did not, well, when I say we, some of the public did not anticipate would switch, for example, Choiseul. From
Hmm.
very early on, some of the concerns of younger voters was that they actually wanted a change in their parliamentary representative. They too questioned what kind of leadership had actually been given based on the resources that had been given by the government of St. Lucia. They had discussions with their families about why they had allegiances to particular political parties, and the questions were posed, but the answers were not forthcoming as to what is your why for voting. So I think a number of people in this iteration were able to look away from party color and make a distinct difference, which pulled not just a party base from perhaps the opposition in particular, but to focus on what the real issues were and the performance of the government of St. Lucia at that time. So I think a number of young people really pushed the envelope in breaking that fetter of just being a party loyalist to now asking the questions, who is actually governing the country better, and what do I actually want to see for my community, and being able to speak out in a way that was very clear and concise.
All right. So you somewhat answered my next question, but you feel free to add to it if you so please. Did the young people show up the way you expected, whether through voting, advocacy, or online engagement?
But online engagement is difficult to measure because sometimes it's a skewed representation of all your voices, and because youth is a dynamic mix, you may not see all demographics at the same time, or even on the same platforms. But I know that they were engaged in following a number of things. Manifestos might have swayed more persons than others.
Mhm.
Some people might have been following the government's actual performance and the impact on their own lives, because I had students, for example, who told me that their CXCs were paid by the government, and if they were eligible to vote, would be the thing that would be swaying their votes, because you want to understand their why. Others
Mhm.
said that because their families were uh, loyalists of a particular political party, they would have followed for that particular reason. So there were varied factors driving different discourses, even regional considerations that the average Sinutian might not have looked at. They would
Mhm.
have examined what had been going on in Trinidad and Tobago in the St. Vincent context, and understanding what does a shift in leadership mean, not just for St. Lucia's national development, but for the Caribbean, which is in a moment of flux where we're trying to realize, is change going to happen? Kisa kay feta set ni sipis no
Mhm.
hawe di fo bagay ka feta Trinidad, ka feta Seveson, es nou vle men bagay la set ni si. And that these were some of the considerations that they were putting forward. So I did see engagement of varied kinds of young people sharing their views for varied reasons. So they are listening and following, and especially the children this time around. We
Mhm.
saw them engaged, energized in a different way, more so than in other elections, in being aware of what was happening around them, in wanting to, as one young man from Shozel said, not being able to vote, but they can support.
They can
And their
support.
support, yes, when their support was very clear.
And you're right. And I was going to follow up that with, if there's is there anything that surprised you most, or what, if anything, surprised you most about their involvement in this election cycle?
I wouldn't say it surprised me as much as to say that it really just perhaps reiterated what had been happening in other key elements of our society. In the Calypso season, for example, I found that
Mhm.
was an interesting marker a few years before, that every year most of the Calypso songs were either in support of the government of Saint Lucia or in opposition to the
Opposition.
the opposition. And children mirror in a lot of ways the discourses that are happening among families in meaningful ways. And so if in their household a discussion is happening where one family favors the other, children will speak Lapani Sigwe Apami
Mhm.
Mamai. So even if Miguel, you lie and you say, well, I'm not buying mommy anything, your daughter will go and say, Mommy, daddy lied. He said she's going to buy you a purse. children know and they say, and they're very perceptive, and there isn't that inhibition to lie. They're very authentic in really expressing how they feel, in looking at what's happening. And in the build up towards this election season too, we saw a very organized campaign that built a particular kind of movement that encapsulated people in different ways. There was the creative aspect of it that pulled in song and music and dance, which is also part of our
Mm-hmm.
political culture that is catchy for children that they can follow. And
Uh-huh.
in meaningful ways, they've heard about the youth economy, they've heard about different things that pertain to children, and it matters to them. And obviously, in the classroom too, teachers will be discussing these issues also with them. So it did not surprise me.
Okay, that said, do you believe that the young people, today's young people, understand their political power?
That's a good question, Miguel. I won't start with political power. I think I'd ask the question if they understand their role in the society.
There you
And I
go.
don't think that many young people understand that, and that's not necessarily a fault of theirs, but our failure to have an education that goes back past examination. Nu vle mamay nou fe biye, di de l'ekol, me dile nou pa ka mande kwestyon, ki kalte mamay nou vle? What kind of values do you want your children to leave the school system with? They always will say, okay, I want my child to have a job and my child must get this. There's always what the public wants from the society, but not necessarily what their participation, what their contribution will be, because it's necessary to build that kind of partnership. I don't think we have been civic minded enough to create that kind of system where young people first understand that they are Saint Lucian, that they can celebrate being Saint Lucian. Because I dare anyone to ask a random set of young people, any young people, are you proud to be Saint Lucian? And they hesitate to answer. It's not because they aren't proud, but we don't discuss these things a lot in our national development or highlight the beauty of being Saint Lucian. We can highlight a number of the things that are going not as well as we would like or what is lacking. The beautiful things about our society are not the things that we tend to valorize a lot. And so when you have young people who are growing up who are not having these conversations, when they come to age of voting, it's like, Senator, some of them are disinterested. There's a level of apathy because there's not been a concerted effort to build a solution person or citizen that will go into society and now say, okay, this is my role. I am passionate about a particular field, and my hope is that in Babano or in VA4 or Sufwe or Monripo, I want to see my community grow by virtue of the skills I can bring. We're not having these kinds of discussions with them. And so if they don't understand their role as citizen, then they won't understand their role as political actors in a meaningful way.
All right. And before we take a quick break, just let me ask you on that note, do you think that it may just be a bit overwhelming for them? I'm having to take on so much, and there's so much for them to try to understand, and I guess it goes back to bringing the whole issue of civics and understanding of the electoral process back to the schools. But maybe as a young person, the average young person may find all this overwhelming for them. What would you say to that?
I don't think it's overwhelming. I think it can be empowering, and it depends on what you
Mhm.
share with them. There is a course that is taught at the South Louis Community College, a survey of St. Lucian history and heritage. And I always like to ask a question. Do you think St. Lucians fought for their independence or emancipation? Sometimes I might get blank stares or the immediate answer, no. And then when we go into the lesson about it, they're like, Miss, I never knew about that. And they live with a sense of appreciation and pride, knowing things that they didn't know before, that helps them think a little more deeply in ways that they don't consider. The important thing is to always present to your people an idea, a vision, a roadmap that is positive, that they can build off from, as opposed to assuming that it doesn't matter and not teaching them at all. And then they go out into the world and other people feed them propaganda or their image of what they want young people in St. Lucia to look like. And that's where we run into a lot of dangers.
Mhm. All right, great. You're listening to Youth Unplugged with me, Miguel Fevrier, and my guest Rhyesa Joseph, and we're discussing youth engagement in politics with the recently concluded general elections. And of course, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to speak about another one of Rhyesa's fortes, Creole, and its introduction into the schools and its place in our education system. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Jano giving Monday, plenty, plenty Monday, 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 Monday.
The Christmas Wishmaker loan is back. Janu Credit Union members get up to $25,000 for Christmas and end-of-year expenses. It's easy to qualify and repayments are affordable. Have an existing loan? No additional shares required. Just top up your original loan balance twice until January 15 to make your wishes come true. Just visit Janu Credit Union in Castries or Vieux or email apply at cscreditunion.org and make the magic happen. Janu, together we can move mountains.
Jano giving Monday, plenty, plenty Monday, 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 Monday. Jano.
Zoetry Marigold Bay invites you to ring in 2026 with sophistication, charm, and gastronomic adventures. Let us ride the midnight tide into an elegant soiree of live entertainment, fireworks, and premium champagne. For reservations, contact us today at 758-714-6222. That's 758-714-6222.
This Christmas, SMJ Beverages and Lumnut Distributors wants you to sip, celebrate, and win big. Enjoy your favorite SMJ drinks, Fruta, Classic Ginger Ale, Cool Kids, Turbo Energy, and more for a chance to win up to $10,000 in cash. Available at participating outlets, Glass Supermarket, CPJ, Marcy Stores, and Ultramart Island-wide. Grab yours today and enter to sip, celebrate, and win big this Christmas. SMJ, bringing the flavor, fun, and festive cheer. Distributed by Lumnut Distributors Limited. This promotion has been approved by the St. Lucia National Lotteries Authority.
But imagine, sometimes it's feeling like there's only 2 days in the week. Yesterday was Monday, and look at that Friday afternoon. So hear that. Do you have a talent or skill that you can turn into a business idea? Well, don't sleep on you, my youth. Get your business started today. The Youth Economy Agency will guide you. Provide funding. Yes, sister, provide funding. Plus training to run your business profitably. Yo, go online now to start living the St. Lucian dream. Just one click and boom, you're in business.
Love St. Lucia, it's time for a Western Winter Wonderland party. Friday, December 13th from 8 p.m. at the Blue Marlin Restaurant, Seraphim Bayfront, Fisheries Complex, Castries. Get ready for boots, bubbles, and a whole lot of festive fun with music by DJ Shortman and DJ Kim. Plus a special performance by the Country King himself, Siobhan Seeley. Admission is just $40. Food and drink on sale. Get your tickets today at Blue Marlin Restaurant or call 284-4286 or 485-8610 for more information. Yeehaw!
Welcome back to Youth Unplugged with me, Miguel Fevrier, here on RCI 101.1 FM, the Caribbean Sound, and my guest, Miss Rhyesa Joseph. And we're going to head straight into something that she is quite adept in, and that is Creole. And Rhyesa did serve as the executive director of the Folk Research Center. So my first question to you on that topic, Rhyesa, is, as someone passionate about culture, how satisfied are you with the process of introducing Creole at the school level? Oops, hold on a second. Sorry, Rhyesa. I think I did not, for some reason, I'd taken you off the stage. I'm not sure if we got disconnected. So, did you hear that last question?
Oui, ma teten question.
Okay, Creole moi pas fort.
Ou kay ni pou ese faire bagay mais na parler ni en créole ni en anglais.
Okay.
Le mate tan nouvelle la yo te kay mete créole à l'école mate kotan. Mo kotan je asui ko sa masa by tout opinion ma asui mais moi vle we pli a éducation pour pousser créole à l'école. As I am aware, the introduction of Creole in schools has begun as a pilot. I am awaiting more affirmative reporting on when it will be expanded, the resources to be allocated, because while we might introduce Creole in schools, maybe the necessary resources might not always be there to give the requisite support. And I am hoping that it would be given even more priority than even the foreign languages that we teach, whether it is French or Spanish, given that we want our children to speak Creole not just as an added advantage, but as part of their heritage and history. Nou vle yo pale Creole, pis yo seje Creole. Po yo apon ki manye yo ni pou vive di de sosyete ya. And in many ways, when we think about teaching the language, it is also a part of our own survival and memory creation and preservation. And we need it in so many other ways that we don't necessarily consider in our hospitals, in our judicial system, in interacting, in learning from our elders, and in interacting in general. Kwa sa mwen bwe ko otorite la, mwen mwen vle vwe pli asu langaj kwe yo la l'ekol. Mwen koten asi.
In fact, and you covered it pretty well. I was going to ask what key improvements, in fact, advising the government as we move forward, what areas you would likely want them to focus on as we try to integrate it into the curriculum. If there's anything you'd like to add to that.
Well, it should be mandatory for all students to learn Creole from the primary school up. I know that more time and resources should be given to teachers to actually give it the proper treatment that it needs because you're not just teaching the language. La ou ka estime may un langage, espos mo yon ko Creole ki pou diwa l'histoire nou, chay moun ha ja essaye detui, you also have to teach the history of the language too. Where did it come from? Who are the persons who make up the language? What are some challenges? Why do we have such prejudice against the language? Why would my grandmother speak a language and tell me not to speak it? We have to educate people on the trauma connected to it so that they can have a greater appreciation. And all of these things require time and resources to be poured in. It's also necessary if you're going to introduce Creole in schools to also say Creole needs to be an official language of St. Lucia. Because one aspect that we've left out of our development and social justice discourse is that for centuries and even in our independence decades, we have left out the Creole person in education, and this has stopped them from acquiring opportunities and access in a meaningful way, not because they did not merit it, but because the school system was not structured for them. So even in our discussion, for example, on elections, no pale ki manye amon pati sa feti kwa biye, could it also be that because we were explaining an English person to a Creole person that the person didn't understand what you were saying, and so you misinterpreted that as them being uneducated, but you did not communicate the information in a way that could be fully understood by them. So these are the considerations we want because we want our people to be able to thrive because we are a bilingual state. So we have to create the resources for communication to continue to be done. Even on the radios, to make sure that persons ensure we don't just speak to the public in English, but also in Creole.
All right, and I know it's a lengthy discussion. This is going to would be a lengthy discussion, but if you can truncate it for me, in terms of having done your research and your studies through on our culture, what do you think are the predominant reasons for whatever stigma that's attached to the Creole language and speaking the language?
Okay, so when we look at enslavement is a total institution in which you try to destroy the body, the mind, and the consciousness. So language is a form of resistance and unity. So the aim was for you not to be able to speak a language, to not be able to communicate, and therefore to pass on your traditions. On a second tier, when Europeans, whether it is the British or the French, because sometimes we have these very superficial discussions that if we were French, it'd be better. When they come, they also try to impose their levels of civility. And it means that you have to speak their language to fit in and to have these kinds of patterns. So it's a way of reinforcing the elitism of Europeans by making sure that you speak their language. So you want to reinforce that their language is the most elite because you must speak to them in that way, but you must also simultaneously denigrate everything that is indigenous. So Creole, historically, from both colonial governance writings and even Europeans themselves, is the language of the ignorant, of the rural, of the toothless women, and that is a deliberate attempt to harbor inbuilt hatred and animosity. And that's perpetuated continuously, even to the point that some of the first teachers in St. Michel are not by accident, not not St. Lucian, to ensure that you eradicate Creole from schools. So you import them from Barbados and other spaces to make sure that Creole is not taught in schools. So it really is a continuation of the colonial project to ensure that European ideas and values are always held as the highest standard of civility, education, and humanity. That's what it's meant for.
You know, it's you say that, and in my writings, in one of my writings I actually did just briefly mention the anglicization of our the names of our communities that are predominantly French. And we found like the politicians on both sides, Banan was one that featured, and you'd hear them saying bananas, 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 and I would cringe. I would say, listen, it's a French word. It's a French word. Yes, there's an S, but why all of a sudden are we saying bananas? And we know I've known it as banan my entire life. So for me, that it's an inherent stigma in having to just speak the quote unquote speak Queen's English to sound like we do have some form of education or intellect. All right. So, right. So we're going to go into the rapid fire round, where you answer the questions. The first, nothing too hard, nothing too hard that gets that the top of your head. So the first
Okay.
question is, quail or English?
Creole.
Which one do you dream in?
I said Creole first.
Yeah, which one do you dream in?
Wow, that's interesting. When I write on my dreams, I'll have to go back to check, but I just say Creole right off the top of my head.
That's an interesting question. As I typed it, I was wondering. I wonder if
No,
people.
but no, but
Go
but
ahead.
here's the thing: to ask if I dream in Creole is also to assume that Creole is just a language, sure. It's
Oh,
and not an experience and a
an
culture
experience.
as well.
You're very,
Yes,
very, very right. Because you may have a dream, and then, in fact, within that dream, people may speak to you in so many different languages. Especially if it's set in Saint Lucia, and someone might speak to you in Creole and English another time. So it's just an experience, as you
yeah,
would say.
yes.
All right. Next question. One political thinker every youth should read,
Rex Nettleford.
and why?
Rex Nettleford speaks about creating space in the Caribbean, and I think it lets us see ourselves at present and our growth, and how our society, through the interactions between indigenous people, Europeans, enslaved societies, were able to grow and fight for identity and becoming. And that's also a great base for how I was able to build up on my work and understand Kunme a lot better. So I'd say Rex Nettleford, brilliant mind, Jamaican
Yes.
thinker.
Yeah. Okay. The most underrated thing about Saint Lucian culture.
Wow. That one had it. The most underrated thing about St. Lucia's culture
Yeah, what do
is
you
that
love the most?
it's just so rich and dynamic. The unique things, even in this election season, the phrases that and somebody just saying earring, it could carry an election
Oh yes,
momentum.
you know, rouge, all of these things carry. That's true.
Yes, solutions are just naturally creative. Whether it's a fisherman, a bus driver, it's like it happens so spontaneously and naturally that the average person can cause a movement just by speaking in Creole. And that's just so beautiful about it. Somebody on the side of the road, you capture a viral moment. Even outside of that, that's just a richness. There's just so many aspects. Just being a Creole society that's so dynamic, versatile, that there's nobody like us in Mission anywhere else in the world. And that
Oh,
is the truth.
indeed, 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 indeed. All right, our final question in the rapid fire round. One sentence of advice for the youth.
Hmm. One sentence of advice. Hmm. Being Saint Lucian is the most extraordinary blessing in the world, but you must read your history.
That's my girl. All right, that's it. All right, Raisa, as we close, is there anything else that you like to add? Any messages out there to our listeners, as it relates to our development, our language, and just moving forward as we come out of a very heavily contested election season, and some might say it was a very bitterly contested, depending on who you
Mhm.
ask, election season.
Well, I'd say that our nation must always be more important than our political parties. And if our nation is placed first, we will always make the right decision for St. Lucia. If we're looking at which party or which individuals can best serve us, then that can be a priority. And that the St. Lucia we want to see will not be accomplished simply by the men elected into political office.
Men
We
and
as
women.
citizens have, yes,
Men and women.
that yes, men and women that we elect into office. It was just a generalization because we say mankind all the time. We don't say womankind, and we know
Yeah.
that it means the collective. That the society we want to see, we really have to create it by our own participation. And many of us have skills and talents. We see the political process and we critique it, but in small but meaningful ways, whether it's in our families, in volunteer groups, at our workplaces, we can do a lot more to create the kinds of systems that support development. Because a number of the resources that are being provided now are not entitlements, they're resources for the moment, but we must capitalize upon them so that we can create new opportunities for generations who will come after this particular one. So let's move forward as St. Lucians and continue to build our country together.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Miss Rhyesa Joseph. Thank you so much for your insight, your clarity, and as always, what I admire about you, your dedication to community upliftment and national development. So, to the young people listening, your voice matters, your choices matter, and your presence in every national conversation matters. Don't let anyone who tells you just because you are a youth person means that you are entitled and you deserve a seat at the table and you have to earn it. It always matters because you are the future. So every decision that is made that affects you affects the future of the country. So with that, I say stay informed, stay engaged, and stay rooted in who you are. This has been Youth Unplugged, folks, on Radio Caribbean International, the Caribbean Sound, with me, Miguel Fevrier. Reminding you to stay bold, stay conscious, and stay true to yourselves. It was brought to you by the Youth Economy Agency, turning those talents and those interests into viable businesses. Until then, goodbye.
But imagine, sometimes it's feeling like there's only 2 days in the week. Yesterday was Monday, and look at that Friday afternoon. So hear that. Do you have a talent or